Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. More specifically, a brand new Albums I Missed video. Today we will be talking about a slew of albums that came out in the month of July 2023 that, unfortunately, I did not have the chance to talk about in a full-blown album review. But before we start, I first want to command each and every one of you to say happy birthday to the Metal Meltdown's lovable plush crocodile mascot, Chompy. This little guy is 2 years old. Isn't that crazy? Look how much he's grown. Look at how many people he's killed. How fascinating, might I add, that Chompy would debut in a vinyl record livestream and also be single-handedly responsible for the destruction of all streaming equipment we have here in the apartment. This has nothing to do with Robert's own incompetence as a human being, and everything to do with the fact that despite being a plush, you're a dangerous creature. Okay, albums I missed, July 2023. Let's go. Let's kick things off with Blood Omen from the Raven Age. And of all of the albums that we're about to talk about, this one is definitely one of them. Pretty crazy, right? It has songs, it makes noises, it's approximately 39 minutes long. Oh my goodness! Wow, this thing is more intense and action-packed than Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. This thing has as many twists and turns as a straight road. I haven't been this excited since I watched paint dry. No sarcasm here whatsoever, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. This was an experience that I will treasure for the rest of the next 15 seconds. One thing is for certain, though, ladies and gentlemen, I definitely do not think that this is one of the most boring, bland, generic, milquetoast heavy metal records of 2023. And I definitely don't think that the only reason Raven Age have any kind of popularity or momentum whatsoever is because of nepotism and the fact that the Raven Age are constantly on tour with Iron Maiden. Bravo! Great job all around, the Raven Age. I thought this was an album. Next up, we have Datalysium, brand new studio album from the Zenith Passage, or honestly, at this point, if you prefer, the Faceless 2.0. Granted, this band always wore its love of the Faceless quite proudly on its sleeve. It's worth noting that Justin McKinney, the band's mastermind, was a member of the Faceless for a brief period in the 2010s, even performing on 2018's In Becoming a Ghost. Michael Keane also contributed to their previous album, Solipsist, back in 2016. But now we also have two other former members of the Faceless joining the fray. Notably, Derek Rydquist and Brandon Griffin, who both performed on Akeldama and Planetary Duality back in the mid-2000s. In the process, this band has unintentionally, but nevertheless, become to the Faceless what a band like the Halo Effect is to In Flames. Like, for real, if you miss the glory days of Akeldama and Planetary Duality and just, like, kind of late 2000s technical progressive death metal in general, then you are going to love this fucking record. Nice, super clean, punchy, transparent production, lots of great dynamics, some great grooves, some great guitar playing, everything is precise and neat. By no means a groundbreaking or revolutionary display, but a fun and well-made tech death record from start to finish. Next up, we have Amongst the Low and Empty from Signs of the Swarm, and fun fact here, I actually had a review for this album filmed and ready to go. But when I was editing it, I realized, damn, I'm not really enjoying this. I'm not really talking shit about the album in the video, but like, I just look and sound like somebody who is thoroughly uninterested in the album in question. And that kind of describes my feelings about this overall album altogether and why I didn't put that review up. I just didn't really have much to say. I don't hate it, but I'm thoroughly disinterested in a lot of what it does. There are some electronic segments and some influences from tech death and progressive death metal that I think are kind of cool, but for the most part, this really is your standard modern deathcore record, complete with all the generic breakdowns and all the ham-fisted grooves and all the same vocal guttural assaults that you've come to expect from the genre. It is, to be fair, more flexible and dynamic than your standard deathcore record, but not to the point where I could say this isn't your standard deathcore record. Next up, we have Wet Ass Plutonium, the debut studio album from Nuclear Power Trio, a shred metal, instrumental prog metal band featuring, apparently, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un. Yeah, it goes without saying that even by goofy gimmick band standards, this is one hell of a goofy gimmick. This is fucking goofy and gimmicky as fuck. But you know what? Credit where it's due to Trump and Vladimir and Kim Jong-un. They kind of knock it out of the park. This album is kind of a bop. Very funky, very unpredictable, very slick, very cool, very well presented. It kind of feels like the best elements of like Tupperware Remix Party and Animals as Leaders just brought into one extremely well produced and surprisingly nuanced, but ultimately still fucking goofy ass package. Complete with puns and horns and synthesizers and probably some of the most flashy shredding I think I've heard on any kind of like instrumental shred metal record in a long time. So yeah, fuck it. I guess I dig Wet Ass Plutonium, and I guess I have to concede that there is one good thing that Trump, Putin, and Kim have given all of us in the world. This album. So, yeah. Next up, we have God Made Me an Animal, the first ever EP or first ever release of any kind from this American metalcore mathcore supergroup, Better Lovers, featuring members of Every Time I Die, The Dillinger Escape Plan, and Fit for an Autopsy. And yes, it is every bit as fucking awesome as you think it is. Chaotic, jarring, jagged, brutal, uncompromising. It is definitely a combination of the most visceral elements of both Every Time I Die and the Dillinger Escape Plan. It's weird, it's moody, it's erratic. You'll have these gnarly, like, chaotic hardcore and groove metal parts. Then you'll have these, like, crossover thrash bits and pieces. Then you'll have some weirder vocal dynamics and textures, the kind of stuff that Greg Puciato was doing with the Dillinger Escape Plan on records like Ironworks. It's just an absolutely badass and visceral display. Too short, dare I say, at 15 minutes. I mean, I get it, it's an EP. But this thing had me salivating for more. Hands down, one of the best EPs I've heard so far this year. If you are not already paying attention to Better Lovers, change that immediately, please and thank you. Next up, we have The Age of the Offended, brand new studio album from Norwegian death metal crew Cadaver. Not gonna lie, that title is pretty fucking cringe, but the album itself, pretty sick, pretty gnarly, pretty ghastly. Tons of gross, demented, acidic vocal displays and spats, some gnarly riffs. It's brutal, it's in your face. It's not the most clever or nuanced or even dynamic. It's not the most clever or nuanced or dynamic, but it gets the job done. It hits pretty hard, and then it goes home. Dirk Verburen on drums, I think, has breathed a lot of life into Cadaver, and it's great to see that he is still with Cadaver on this album. He remains a highlight for me in this band. It's also kind of neat to see Cadaver getting a little bit more grim and sinister and dark on this thing. These guys are definitely pulling influence from, you know, the Norwegian metal scene. I would definitely say that this has a bit of a blackened underbelly to it in comparison to previous studio albums. Overall, I think if you like Cadaver, if you like what these guys have been putting out, I don't see why this album would suddenly, like, piss you off or anything like that. Ignore the cringe title. There's some decent stuff here. Next up, we have a compilation album, Demos and Oddities from Contrarian, Friends of the Metal Meltdown. I was a big fan of their most recent studio album, Sage of Shekinah, which I called one of the best albums of 2023 so far, back in the middle of June. I don't know about y'all, but I personally was not aware that Contrarian, or at least some version of Contrarian, existed as far back as the mid to late 90s. And it seems as though Contrarian have decided to release their earliest recorded stuff from this time period and assemble it here for us now. To my knowledge, there has been no remastering or remixing done to this material whatsoever. It is being presented to us exactly how it was recorded back in the day. And it's pretty interesting. It's a lot more raw and primitive and simplistic than what I'm used to hearing from Contrarian, like on the aforementioned Sage of Shekinah. It's still pretty firmly rooted in like 90s tech death and progressive metal, but it also flexes, I would say, some more kind of classic heavy metal influences. These songs definitely lack the cohesion and the refinement that I expect from Contrarian nowadays, or really any kind of like tech death prog metal band, but it's fun. Definitely something that the most loyal and diehard of Contrarian fans will get a kick quick out of. It won't be knocking anything else from Contrarian out of the playlist anytime soon, but it's pretty fun. It's pretty solid. It makes for a nice little piece of background noise, a nice little palate cleanser for whatever the next big, crazy, heavy thing you're looking into is. Next up, we have At Storm's Edge from Aetherian. Very ambitious, powerful, melodic death metal from Athens, Greece. Fantastic songwriting, fantastic performances, even better production. It's elaborate, it's incredibly well put together. This has the muscular feel and the momentum of like something from Amon Amarth, but it also has the grace and the melodicism of something like, say, Be'lakor or Amorphous. It is a record with a lot of sensation and spectacle. It is a very bombastic record, and I would argue as a result of all of this, a somewhat overwhelming record at times. Like, there is objectively a lot happening, and it can be a lot to process and absorb. But overall, it's hard to deny just how well crafted and executed this record is from start to finish. Frankly, I think it's some of the best and some of the most epic and grandiose songwriting I've seen from melodic death metal in 2023. Had we gone ahead and done a full-blown review of this album, this probably would have gotten something close to a 4 out of 5, leaning towards a 4.5 out of 5. And honestly, it would not shock me at all if this ended up on a couple of Album of the Year lists by the time we roll around to December. Would not shock me even a little itty-bitty fucking bit. Next up, we have The Way of All Flesh is Decay, debut studio album from End Rain, a metallic, hardcore, crossover thrash, extreme metal supergroup featuring members of Integrity, Pig Destroyer, Exhumed, All Out War. And I'm just gonna say it, this thing is just pure fucking anger from start to finish. Holy shit. The energy, the power, the aggression, absolutely unmatched. This all-star cast of like punk, hardcore, and metal musicians are just playing their fucking hearts and guts out on this goddamn thing. Citing influence from Amoebics, Bathory, Slayer, the Cro-Mags, pulling influence from all of their respective bands as well, and just combining it into something totally chaotic, totally unstoppable. It does grow a little tiring as it just continues to pummel and pound away, but goddamn, it remains incredibly enjoyable all the way through, especially with some guest stars that do provide some extra twists and turns, like Dylan Walker from Full of Hell shows up on this thing. This thing is just wild and crazy and fun, and I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on this, because like, it really flew under the radar. I don't really feel like Relapse Records did any promotional stuff for this record at all. Like, I didn't even really hear about this from anyone. I just kind of found this by accident one day. Next up, we have Monuments to Absence from Fen, and I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I enjoyed this album, but more so as a palate cleanser than as an actual, like, album experience. Like, after listening to the technical fuckfest of the Zenith Passage and Nuclear Power Trio, and, you know, the energetic hardcore and metal of Better Lovers and End Rain, and the more grandiose, bombastic, over-the-top mellow death of Aetherian, I was happy to just have, like, some more lush, atmospheric post-black metal to just kind of chill and vibe with. Which isn't to say that this record doesn't have its own ambitions and aspirations, because it does, but it's just different, you know? It's like when you go to the same restaurant for a while, suddenly you just want something different, even if it's not that different, you know? You've been to 3 Italian restaurants, why not try the Greek restaurant, you know? That's kind of how I feel here. I liked its cascading waves of lush, cinematic, atmospheric, post-black metal, you know? It kind of reminds me of stuff that Lantlos was doing back in the day, and also stuff from Alcest. I do think the record is a little bit too long for its own good, clocking in at 67 minutes, and with most of the tracks clocking in somewhere around 7.5 and 9.5 minutes. But all in all, I would say that I enjoyed this album, and again, if you're just looking for something different amidst everything else that we've talked about in this video, and amidst everything else that we've talked about this month, I think this'll do you some good. I think you too will enjoy this album, very much so. Next up, we have Prosaic from Mizmor, brand new album from this one-man black metal, sludge metal, doom metal project fronted up by ALN. If I'm not mistaken, we've talked about some of his other projects in the past, like At Wit's End and the Thou collaborative record Myopia. I know for a fact that I did not talk about Dialethea or Cairn here on the Metal Meltdown, but I do remember really enjoying those records and how dense and claustrophobic and smothering those records were. This, by comparison, is a lot different. It's less high concept. It's less poignant, I would say. It is still quite brutal, but I think it is more brutal in a more everyday, slice-of-life kind of way, straying from the religious and secular themes of previous studio albums. And to be honest, I really like those changes for Mizmor and for ALN as an artist. I think it makes for something that is a little bit more easier to relate to. I think it makes for a record that feels just as personal and just as powerful, though not as grandiose. This was an album that we almost reviewed here on the Metal Meltdown, and had we done so, I think we'd be looking at a solid 4 out of 5. I think this is a great album, and I would highly recommend it to anyone looking for some really depraved, but not necessarily smothering stuff. And finally, this brings us to Cemetary Pav's brand new studio album from the glorious, dead, badass, gnarly, hellish, old-school death metal with great production value, a decent amount of variety in the songwriting. You have these acoustic sections, you have these thrashy sections, you have some slower sections. It all kind of feels like, you know, various eras of Morbid Angel kind of sandwiched together into something very, like, ugly and crusty. Love the guitar tone on this thing especially, love the drums, love all the riffs and performances, honestly. Very straightforward record. It doesn't waste a lot of time. It does maybe go on for maybe a little bit too long, clocking in at 45 minutes, but all 45 of those minutes are pretty action-packed, pretty full of gnarly, grotesque death metal insanity. Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say if you're in the mood for just true, powerful, uncompromising death metal, this is it. You're gonna fucking love this record. I personally had a lot of fun with this myself. And that is it! Those are all the albums that I feel I missed in the month of July 2023. Now it's your turn to tell me, what else did I miss? Is there something else perhaps so important that I did not talk about here that I need to check out for myself in the near future? What did you think of the albums that we've talked about today? Did you like them? Did you hate them? Do you feel somewhere in the middle about them? Do you even give a shit at all? Tell me, please, and thank you. Press this button to subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. Look, there's even more videos here. Make sure you say happy birthday to Chompy, or else I will come and fucking find you and beat you to a pulp. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day. Seriously though, wish this guy a happy birthday. You don't even have to worry about me. Like, this is an actual crocodile. You don't want to piss him off. You do not want to know what he did to the neighbors. You really fucking don't. Bye!